Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a brilliant game. It's an epic game, to be honest. It is story-driven, immersive, it's beautiful, and above all, it is engaging. It is absolutely a worthy successor to Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 in every way. In fact, I'd probably describe KCD2 as more of the same, but a little better, at least in most ways. There are some ways in which I preferred the first game. I'll talk about those a little later on. But the easiest way to describe Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is that it is more of the same. It's a direct continuation from the first game. The story begins where that first one leaves off. The game will feel very similar if you've played that first one, although there are some differences. It does look a lot nicer, which is amazing because Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 was an amazing looking game, but number 2 really does look great. It performs better than the first one. The first one had some performance issues, especially around big battles, and that still occurs even on powerful PCs like mine. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 performs better than KCD1 on my machine. I got 120 frames per second rock solid at ultra settings. So, and I didn't notice a single drop even during some of the big battles. So it is just sort of a continuation, but better. Now I'm really assuming most people know what the KCD series are, but just in case, if there's someone out there who's landed on this video and is not really sure what I'm talking about, Kingdom Come Deliverance is it's now 2 games that is set in medieval Europe. It's kind of like a fantasy RPG, but with no fantasy. You've got armor, swords, horses, knights, pitched battles, castles, that sort of thing. You're just not fighting dragons, you're fighting other men. I mean, arguably it has an alchemy system for you to make potions, which does stretch reality a little, but overall it is a far more realistic, and I'm using air quotes around that word, RPG. You're playing something set in historical times, and as such, it will feel a little more mundane at times. Like I said, no magic, no dragons, no mystical creatures. But that grounding in reality is a big part of the appeal. You start focusing on little details like whether or not you're clean, whether you're covered in mud or blood, because believe it or not, that makes a huge difference in this game. People will react to you very differently based upon what you're wearing, what condition the clothes are in, and as I've mentioned, whether or not you're disgustingly dirty or not. Now I can understand that if you are new to this type of game, you might think that would be overbearing. You don't want to spend your entire gaming time thinking about whether or not you should clean your armor. You don't actually. It's not overbearing at all. Suddenly you'll probably just notice it, and then you will say, right, I'm just going to wash my hands, and there's usually somewhere to wash nearby. It doesn't take long, but there are occasions when you will decide to not clean yourself, because there are moments where being covered in blood could work to your advantage. For example, if you're trying to intimidate someone. And there are lots of little mechanics like that that are just dotted throughout this game that make it such a pleasure to play. How you look, how you behave affects the people around you. If you're seen sneaking around an area by a guard, and then later on something gets stolen, that guard will remember that they saw you sneaking around. If you're wearing the clothes of a beggar, they will pay more attention to you if you're in an area that's supposed to be filled with rich people, etc. All of these little things that make the world feel alive. It's not overbearing when it focuses on these details. It's actually invigorating. It really does make you excited to try different things. It's amazing how many new ways to solve a quest people are finding and then posting. It really encourages a little bit of experimentation. And what I would suggest when playing this game is kind of treat it like it's reality. If you can think of a way to do something, see if it's possible, because you never know, the developers might well have thought of that. However, we really should talk about the elephant in the room, that elephant being the fact that these games are notoriously difficult to get into. Some people consider them a little hard, especially when it comes to combat. People who are used to first-person RPGs will often find some of the mechanics a little counterintuitive and difficult to grapple with. And to be honest, that is a fair critique, but there are reasons for it. What I will say is the second game is a lot easier to get into than the first. But that's mostly because in the first game, you start off as Henry, the son of a blacksmith, who has absolutely no skills other than helping his dad around the forge and occasionally getting drunk and trying to hit it off with his girlfriend. That is basically who you start the game as, and you spend the first 10 to 15 hours pretty much incapable of doing anything like fighting, yeah? You can barely swing the sword, let alone block. You're more or less useless at everything. You can't even read at the start of the first game. You actually have to go off and do a quest quite well into the game, actually. You're probably 20, maybe 30 hours into the game before you go off and learn to read. And you need to practice reading to get better at it throughout the game. But in the second game, you do start off understanding the basics of combat. You can hold your own if you need to, although it will be a little more difficult than it was at the end of KCD1. No spoilers, but you will not have all of your gear, and you will need to relearn a few things. You don't need to relearn to read. You can still read. Having said that, please understand the combat in this game is occasionally a little challenging. It can be a little frustrating, as it was in the first game, even towards the end. Because whilst you will get good and you'll be able to fight maybe 1-on-1 or even 1-on-2, 1-on-3, and sometimes you'll just feel like a bona fide master of the sword. You will feel absolutely on top of the world. And then the next fight, you might just get someone who gets a lucky blow on you and then they pull off a combo and you're suddenly going backwards, trying to get your rhythm again, screaming and shouting and desperately trying to survive. And when you get into big battles, like, 20 versus 20, and you put down your visor so that you can protect your face, which, by the way, is really important in this game, and you can no longer see half the people around you, and it's just lots of bodies all over the place. You're getting knocked about, you're getting hit, you're trying to hit but nothing's happening, it's just sheer chaos, and it ends up with there's no real technique. You're just trying to wail on whatever's in front of you, hoping he goes down before one of his mates knocks you down. It is absolute mayhem at times, and you will end a fight thinking, wow, I sucked so much there, I couldn't do anything, that was terrible. But you have to remind yourself, you're still alive and your enemies are dead. All things considered, it was a win. Because what I would suggest to anyone approaching this game, if you've heard it's difficult, or if you've tried it, and the combat just, it crushed your ego a little too much, and you just thought, oh, I can't be doing with this. Try again. Bear with it. I'm not going to give you the whole Dark Souls thing of telling you to get good, right? Because I truly believe this is a game that was designed that even when you are good, it's going to knock you on your backside more than once. What I would suggest is just get used to failing every now and again. Get used to feeling like you just lost control of the situation and you're not quite as big a badass as you wish you were. And embrace that feeling. That's a lot of what KCD is about. It's this acceptance that sometimes things just go really, I don't know how to say this without swearing, in a less than positive direction for you, and you end up just screaming and hoping like hell you'll survive this battle. Embrace it, because honestly, That's what happens in war. If I could give you any advice, that's what I would say. You might play this game and think to yourself, oh wow, I suck. No, you don't. You don't suck. War sucks. That's just kind of how it is, and the game frustrating you in some way brings that home. And I know, you've probably seen all these clips on YouTube of one guy taking out 8 opponents with his sword whilst naked and making it look easy. What you don't see is the fact that they've probably tried that battle 4 or 5 times, or they got lucky on that battle, but then on the next battle they got absolutely pounded into the ground. Nobody posts their failures. I will also say there are ways to make the game a lot easier if you are not averse to playing a, shall we say, less than honourable character. You know, you could use stealth, and don't sleep on the alchemy skill. It can be very, very useful. Now that reminds me, I did mention a lot of things have been improved. Alchemy is one of those things that has been improved. I loved alchemy in the first game, but in the second game it feels, well, a little more polished, easier without being simpler. The process is, shall we say, more forgiving, and a lot of that comes down to little things like the ability to just take the pot off the fire so it doesn't keep boiling. It gives you a lot more control over how long something is boiling. It lets you take your time grinding things and adding them. And it also gives you a lot of feedback. When you do an alchemy, Henry will say things if you get things wrong, so that you can try again and do a better job. When I first tried alchemy, I did notice it didn't have the auto brew function, and I thought that was going to be annoying, but in the end, it actually wasn't. And this is partly because you create a lot more potions in the second game for each, alchemy cycle, but also because generally the potions last longer, so you don't actually need to use as many. It made the alchemy something that was a little more accessible. You could use them and last for 15 minutes, some of them last for hours, some of them even last for days, and this makes them very, very useful, but not overly grindy. A number of the skills from the first game have been merged. So for example, herbalism and hunting from the first game have been merged into a skill called survival. And honestly, this really doesn't change much. Both of those skills were ones I generally maxed out in all of my playthroughs anyway, so it doesn't change much. They've done the same with blunt weapons and axes from the first game, and they've just got a category called heavy weapons now, and there's a single skill for that. That does make it a little easier to raise the skill for those weapons, I guess, but overall, again, not something that has affected me all that much. They've also added a polearm skill. I like that. I do like polearms, although I have to say, I do feel like there's some imbalance with the weapons. I've not reached level 30 in all of the weapons, only in sword, so that might explain a little of my feeling that swords are more powerful than the other weapons. I do need to get those skills to level 30 to really definitively say that is the case, but I feel like that is the case. Swords just feel like the better option in all circumstances, even when the opponent is wearing very heavy armor. In the original game, maces definitely felt better against heavy plate armor than swords. In the second one, not so much, to be honest. They've also simplified the combat by reducing the number of directions of attack from 6 to 4. They've removed the lower attacks, the ones from lower left and lower right. You can get attacks from that direction if you pull off certain combos, but for general combat, you're limited to 4 directions, and I am not a fan of that. I realise it means you can have all attacks on one button rather than on 2, but I'm not a fan of that at all. I liked the 6 directional attack. I felt like I could really switch it up, and it was very obvious that you were attacking from different directions. Way more obvious in the first game than in the second, and thus a lot of times, unless I managed to pull off a combo in the second game, I definitely feel like I'm just wailing on the enemy from above. Sometimes it's slightly from the left, sometimes it's slightly from the right, but it does feel a little repetitive when compared to the first game, where I would really do, you know, upward swings, then a downward swing, and then a sideways slash, and it was really obvious which direction I was attacking from. So honestly, to me, this was a bit of a downgrade. I genuinely preferred the sword, the mace combat in the first game. Bow combat, on the other hand, is, well, it's easier in the second game, and a lot of it is just down to the fact that it's easier to aim. You don't have a crosshair in these games, so you're aiming based upon where the bow is, where the arrow is, where your hand is. You're using a lot more sort of instinct, which is a little more realistic, but it was a bit tough in the first game. In the second game, it just feels easier. I think you're sighting down the bow more, which is possibly less realistic, but honestly, it just makes it more viable. Bows? Don't sleep on bows in this game. They're very, very powerful. If you're having trouble, bows and good mobility, stay in light armor, that could be the solution for you. The Master Strike has been massively nerfed in the second game when compared to the first, but that's a good thing, to be honest. They were just way overpowered in the first game. In fact, once you learnt to Master Strike, the game did become kind of trivially easy, so in a way you could say combat is harder in the second game because of this, but honestly I think it is a good development. Unfortunately, whilst they made it harder to do Master Strikes, they also made the decision to only allow Master Strikes, at least for the player, on swords. And swords are already a stronger weapon than the other weapons, in my opinion, and that includes polearm, which is kind of wrong in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, polearms are a viable weapon and there's a very good technique for dominating fights with them, but sword just seems to have the edge even without Master Strikes, and the fact that it has Master Strikes just tips the balance even more in its favour. What's annoying about the game is enemies seem to be able to Master Strike without a sword. I think I've had them do it a number of times with mace or axe. I can't say for sure. I might have just mixed up a combo, but I know for a fact they do it on unarmed combat constantly. It's really annoying. Really, really annoying because you can't do it. It's infuriating, actually. To me, that almost feels like a bug, especially seeing as there are perks that give you advantages when you Master Strike with unarmed attacks, and you can't do that. So why is there a perk? I have a feeling you're supposed to be able to, so I would actually like to see that fixed. Oh, and the maintenance skill from the first game has now become the crafting skill, because you don't just, maintain your armor and swords with this skill, you can also create weapons. You can't create armor, at least not by yourself. With the Legacy of the Forge DLC, you will be able to get certain pieces made for you. I'm not going to give you spoilers. By the way, I've played that DLC. Brilliant DLC. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend. I've not played the other two DLC, but that one is phenomenal. And there's probably tons of things that I've forgotten, but you get the idea. This is very much more of the same, but with a few changes here and there. At its core, this game is still a story-driven RPG with a lot of dialogue where your choices will actually have consequences. And it's a massive game. If you do all the side quests and the main quest, you have probably got at least 100 hours of gameplay right there, and that's just on a single playthrough. This game feels like it's going to be very replayable. You might want to do a different play style, but more importantly, you might want to make different choices. I personally really want to experience more of the dialogue. I do a lot of talking in these games. I know I've barely scratched the surface of the options. For example, I want to do a drunk thief playthrough just so that when I get caught, I can try out this one perk that I've got that lets me talk my way out of the situation. I can only imagine what the dialogue is like for those. I want to do a playthrough where I make the worst and darkest decisions just to see what happens. I want to do a hardcore playthrough with the trait punchable face. Yes, I want to see what happens when you play this game with a punchable face. I just love playing this game. It is such a good story. I really enjoy traveling around doing things. I even enjoy the little things like feeding my dog, fixing my armor, etc. I love the attention to detail. I love the unexpected little encounters, and I know I've not experienced all of those as well. There's a ton of quests that I didn't do in my first playthrough because they didn't suit the character I was playing. I am so looking forward to trying all of those. This game is going to keep me occupied for a long, long time. I felt like the first Kingdom Come Deliverance game was a real work of love, a labor of love. It was also a courageous thing to make. It was obvious that this was going to be a very niche game with sort of a very hardcore audience as its main target. But they did it, and they did it brilliantly. And then, once they got a little bit of mainstream attention, they stuck to their guns. They made a sequel that was worthy of the first game. They didn't try to make it an easy game. They didn't try to Skyrimify it or anything like that. Yes, they polished a few things, but they kept the core game the same, and I love them for that. I appreciate this game did get more mainstream attention, and it got very good critical reviews, but it's still a game, I think, that is going to have a, not so much a niche audience, but a selective audience, because it is a game that can be difficult to finish. Even if you manage to start it. I accept that, but I love the fact that they did this. It's still the Kingdom Come Deliverance experience, and honestly, I'm sort of sorry it's over. I've heard there's not going to be a third game, they're going to make something else, and I'm going to play that. I'm going to play that. I really am. Whatever they make, I am going to try it out. Whatever genre it is, I've heard they might be doing a fantasy RPG. I'm there for that. I do hope it keeps some of the Kingdom Come Deliverance genealogy, and I'm sure it will, but I will play it. But I'm going to miss Kingdom Come Deliverance. I really am. I'm going to miss playing Henry. I'm going to be missing getting into trouble with Hans. I'm going to miss this entire world, the experience, the characters. So whilst I do look forward to the next adventure that they provide us, I'm always going to have a soft spot for this one. Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 was a brilliant game. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was even more brilliant. It just built on the first and ran with it. I absolutely highly recommend both of these games. I know the first game, it can be intimidating because of that start, but it's worth it. Go play the first one and say to yourself in those early stages, run away. Just don't let your ego trip you up. Just run away when the game is giving you the hint. Do those early stages. Get used to the game. Get Henry the skills he needs. Remember, this is a role-playing game. Henry needs the skills. Roll with it. Go with it. And honestly, that first game, you will fall in love with it. Some of the quests. Father Godwin. Ask any KCD fanatic. You've got to do that quest. In fact, you might even find people willing to give you semi-spoiler advice on how to not miss that quest. And honestly, it's almost worth having. As long as it's spoiler-free, as long as they can voice it in a way that doesn't give too much away, you definitely want to do that quest. Both games are brilliant. Highly recommend it, as long as you can live with the fact that at times you are going to be frustrated and you're not going to feel like the superhero you feel like in some other games. But honestly, do it!